Yeah, just as we threatened.
Oh no, it's back. Grumpy Science, quick, hide the kids. All right, so
Okay.
here we are again. We're going to talk about science. We're going to talk about data. We're going to show data.
You betcha.
And so let's go on to the first data slide.
Yeah.
Whoa, my head got really small again. All right, data slide number 1.
Yeah, and so at the top it says Gluten Elimination Diet Example. So basically what we want to do is we're going to go through a few case studies. And a lot of people have asked us, it's like, what do you do with this data? And how do you know it? How do you know if something's helping you? And how do you know if my supplements are helping? Or how do you know if not taking something's helping?
How do you know that anything is happening?
Yeah.
You measure it.
So gluten elimination diet, that's kind of near and dear to my heart because I can't eat gluten because 20 years ago I had, I had all the symptoms of MS. My arms and legs started losing sensation, and I started seeing spots.
He became an insensitive person.
Yeah. Well, in more ways than one.
In more ways than one. Now, he regained his peripheral sensation, but not, deep in his heart. He never regained that sensation.
And so I don't know if you knew this, but, at the time I was surrounded by $1 million worth of laboratory equipment.
Yes, I did know.
I had fairly good knowledge of neurophysiology. And I said, okay, I got to figure out what's going on.
Yes, as scientists such as myself often do, they're like, okay, well, I got the tools.
So
time to figure out.
I went to work. And now, of course, I didn't have a brain gauge, but I had sort of the equivalent, even though it weighed about
a huge rack, the size of a refrigerator.
3 racks of stuff to test myself. And when nobody was looking, I was kind of shy about it. And I just went ahead and I tested myself and said, yeah, I'm totally screwed. So I decided, and I did some research.
Term,
I did some research.
You got to keep that scientific jargon to a minimum there, Dr. Tommerdahl.
Figured out that I was heading for worse, and decided, there's got to be a way to turn this around. And long story short, what I came up with was Paleolithic diet.
Yeah, there was a little bit of literature on it.
Yeah, a little bit written about it at the time.
Time.
And most people thought that anybody that did this was kind of a quack.
Wacko.
Traditional medicine thought you're kind of a quack if you went on a gluten elimination diet. And
anything paleo, 25 years ago, that was not even a thing, right? I mean, I'm going to eat like a caveman, Great, go ahead.
Right, and so I switched to things that only I could hunt and gather, and which is pretty limited.
Yeah, cigarettes and potato chips.
Yeah, I had to cut out my main 2 food groups, which were pizza and beer, and had to cut that out for a while. Now I eat gluten-free pizza and drink gluten-free beer.
Yeah,
but
best of both worlds.
After wiping out everything in my diet, and the one thing that kept me going is I could sort of tell that I was getting better. Very, very slowly by testing myself. And this was something I did for, months. But in this case, this is done more recently. Somebody else that went on a gluten elimination diet, you see that their scores weren't all that great when they started the diet. And they actually, this is their overall score, right up around 100.
So this is data specifically for a person who started a diet to eliminate gluten, right?
Yeah,
to
see if it would
vertical
actually
dashed line, they started the diet at that date, which would be about June 9th, right?
Yeah. And so
then they measure their overall cortical metric, right? Which is their.
So the key thing is that sometimes changes are very slow, and it helps to measure to see if they are changing. The self-perception really doesn't work all that great.
That's right.
Anyway, that's the kind of key thing about that. But you may want to know that many traditional medicines start out as alternative medicines. The gluten elimination diet or the Paleolithic diet, I'm not quite sure which is being going on right now, but it's actually, there's FDA clinical trials to seeing if this will actually help MS. And that was started by an MD who got MS.
20 or 30 years after it could easily have been done.
So for all the people that thought I should have been on immunosuppressant drugs,
that would have helped you.
I really was kind of glad I went this way.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's the slide, and we'll see you at the next slide. And the next slide.
And here we are on the next case study. We're looking at concussion example number 1. And in this case, what you see is the bar chart on the bottom left, and that's their last view. But let's focus on the graph at the top. Graph at the top, they shows they're about at 50% when they
after they had a concussion.
Right after they had a concussion. Yeah. See
the
vertical line under the concussion is the date where the concussion
No testing
happened.
Before the concussion, so there's no real baseline testing required, because we can, with the brain gauge, detect derangements based on large amounts of data that we know is normal.
Right. So you see, like January 30th or so, they tested around 50%. This person took a long time to recover, around February 12th. Almost a couple of weeks later, they're about halfway or a third of the way back. And then they were, by the way, they also, around February 9th, they passed impact.
Yeah, that's right. The standard thing that says, you're good to go. Go ahead and go back and play some more of that.
And a lot of the people
high-impact sport.
A lot of people we work with actually pass their impact test on day 1.
Yeah, it is not accurate.
But they make a good living because they charge a lot.
Yeah. Well, they tell people, okay, you're good to go. Right?
Yeah.
And it's what athletes want to hear.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you see where the return to play. Yeah. Right. So return to play February 21st. It was like, what, 3 weeks later?
Right. And their scores looked a lot better. So they started playing again. And then what happened?
Then they started complaining about headaches. And take the scores again. And basically, one of their scores, sequencing scores at 13. That's the same as TOJ for some people, and it's labeled as temporal order of judgment. That's something that's more frontal, and a lot of times when you get headaches, your score there will be very, very poor.
Right.
But basically, they just had more returning symptoms, and this happens quite often with people with concussion.
Right. So are we done there?
I think we're done.
Okay. We'll see you on the next slide. Okay, more data.
More data. I like data. So, for whatever it's worth. This is, take a look at the graph, and keep in mind, again, I always forget to mention this, but on that top graph that goes from 0 to 100, 0 is bad, 100 is good.
That's why it's red. Yeah. 0 red, bad.
So, and that's your overall score that we're showing.
Yeah.
And so, right post-concussion, that person was nearly 0. They didn't do really well. They got hit kind of hard. So a lot of concussions.
Something rung their bell, as they say. Yeah.
The majority of concussions that we see in sports, people return to play usually in 14 days, and that's about the time that they clear on these tests. But people that really get their bell rung, they don't always, or if they've had multiple concussions,
right,
they take longer, and just like the last one we showed, they take a little longer to get to recover. In this case, this person had a pretty good knock on their head, horrible scores. Then, after 10 days, they were scoring.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's June 2nd to July 12th.
June 2nd to June 12th.
Oh,
you were right the first time.
Okay, I was going to the.
He's got a stroke. Vertical. It's okay.
That's right. I screw up all the time, even before I had a stroke.
So I'm waiting for mine, so I can make excuses.
Right.
So anyway, 10 days later, they're about 70% recovered. Right. Though they had cleared on their other tests, and people held them out. Then they were returned to play July 12th.
A month after that, yeah.
But August 11th, they became symptomatic again. And so you can see the scores there. They were just
so they're playing. They're doing their normal play thing. They don't detect that they're getting any additional injury.
Right. And then what you see on the bottom left is their scores October 12th. They still had not returned to play after becoming symptomatic again because they simply didn't recover.
Right.
Why they didn't recover? Yeah, there's no telling. And what could they do to get better? Hard to say.
Hit to the head they didn't really think much of, or something.
But if you look at the score here on the bottom left, you'll notice that the smaller numbers are worse, and bigger numbers are better. Some things they do okay on, some things they do worse on. And what this is meant to do is, eventually gives us guidance for what to work on. and which scores do worse. Gives you some idea about not just how they're doing, but what could possibly help them.
Right. So is that all we want to say here?
That's all we're going to say here.
All right.
Okay.
And the next slide.
Next slide. We had a whole bunch more concussion examples that we skipped over because we didn't want you to fall asleep. But here's a pulsed electromagnetic field treatment example, and we're just showing you basically how these, how this treatment ran. And we've talked before about the overall study, and you can go back to an earlier Grumpy Science. There was actually two. One was we went through the entire study, and that took a little while. And another one I think we did a 90-second fast version of it. Yeah. But in this one, you can see where the person was around 50% in terms of their overall cortical metric. And the treatment was started, and that was with pulse electromagnetic field. This was with M1.
Yeah, with one of the systems that I make.
And you see that there was slow progression at first. So they didn't get completely better overnight. And
3 weeks or so.
My guess is their self-perception of this was that they weren't really getting better until they kept it on for 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden they're back and up and going. And that looked pretty good from, July 21st to August 15th when treatment was stopped. For whatever reason.
They just stopped, and that was the big change, right? Then all of a sudden they... So what was this person just initially had a concussion from some normal thing they were doing?
This is somebody with chronic TBI. This is in our chronic TBI study, and they had basically the chronic TBI symptoms for years.
Right.
And then
so PEMF was helping them. It took about 3 weeks to bring them back to normal. They were fine, and then after another couple 2-3 weeks, they discontinued treatment for whatever reason. And their scores started dropping back down to where they were, about 50%.
So, my take on this is that they shouldn't have quit treatment. But,
Yeah.
And they should have probably started back as soon as their scores started dropping.
Yeah. I would have. That's just silly me, right?
Anyway, so that's an example of when how do you use this for treatment? And it's to help guide treatment and to see if you're getting better.
Right.
If your
are you getting the right
better.
treatment? Are you getting the right dose? Are you doing the treatment long enough? All the questions you would be asking, and you can measure. You can get a number, and it will tell you what you need to know. So is that it?
That's it.
Okay, next slide.
So here's the next slide. But Bob, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask if you knew what pulsed electromagnetic field was.
No, never heard of it. I've been working in the field for 21 years now, or something. Yeah. 22 years.
Well, I had a little handed out the brain gauges in class, and one of the students said, "Oh, I heard UNC invented this."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Really? I had no idea."
Mm-hmm.
So
it's like telling Edison or something. Yeah, I heard someone else invented the light bulb or something, which is arguably true, but it's a little silly, right?
Yeah. So anyway, we we work with a lot of chiropractors who basically like to show that what they're doing has an effect. A lot of people don't realize that adjustments to the neck, in particular, this is really interesting. Neck injuries actually often present like concussion, and it can be misdiagnosed. Somebody whacks. They present all the symptoms of concussion, but their head is actually fine.
Right.
But the cerebral spinal fluid flow is not fine.
Right.
And when you restore flow, things start working better.
Precisely. So if I was a chiropractor, I would love this data. I mean, look at it. I mean, the way that I interpret this data is that their brain function is low. They get an adjustment. It gets better for a while. And then drops down again, but not quite back to where it was. Another chiropractic adjustment, it gets even better. Over time drops down again. They get another adjustment, it gets even better. And so there's a progressive improvement over time, but also there's a significant sort of blip upward in their cortical function after each one of these adjustments.
Right.
That's a major finding.
Right.
In fact, I don't know that that's ever been quantified before like that.
Probably not. And so what we'd encourage people that are interested in either this or any kind of treatment is give us a heads up and say we'd like to do studies. And this is the kind of study we could actually publish. And
this journal we were talking about 2 episodes ago called the Journal of Comprehensive Integrative Medicine. This is the kind of journal you would publish these findings in. You get a handful of patients, you take cortical metric measurements, you do whatever your treatment is, and you show improvement or not, and let the data fall where they may, and write it up and report it.
Yeah, there's quite a few things in the brain health world that have not really been published or reported on, simply because there were not any effective functional brain measures.
Yeah, it's hard to measure things, so it's hard to put a number on things. It's hard to report them scientifically, but now it's easy. A few $100s, a few $1,000s, you can get as much of this data as you want,
right?
To test the effectiveness of anything, whether it's acupuncture, chiropractic, nutrition, exercise, nootropic drugs, PEMF, whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's it for today.